need to give feedback all the time, but are you struggling? Or are you not certain and a bit worried about what it might do to your relationships? Then Radical Candor is for you because it allows you to be human and direct at the same time. And this relationship-based approach is particularly useful for women that often see some unconscious bias. For example, when a man and a woman both use the same statement, rather harsh statement, then often of a man people say, oh, he's assertive, whereas the woman is automatically depicted as a bitch. And Radical Candor also works perfectly if you haven't got a lot of time, because you can usually give some nuggets of feedback in 1 to 3 minutes. So it is something that you can quite easily integrate into your daily work. Radical Candor was developed by former Apple and Google employee Kim Scott, and she really shows how her approach to giving feedback changed from being very empathic to being radically candid. And she gives a lovely example of Bob. Now, Bob was an employee that she hired when she started her own organization. And Bob was lovely. He was a team player. He was a really funny person, a rather caring person. So, like, really empathic, like someone you want to have on your team, good references. All the team playing parts were good, except for the fact that his work was terrible. It was really awful. And instead of giving feedback, Kim just thought, oh, I can't do that. What if I hurt his feelings? She just didn't give him feedback. And after a while, like most of the people in the team got disgruntled because they had to do the work again. Clients were upset because deadlines were missed. So it really got into this big thing. And at some point, after 10 months, Kim decided that she had to fire Bob. So drinking coffee and tea and doing some chit chat, eventually she said like, okay, I've got to fire you. And Bob was totally upset, well, first stunned. And then he said like, why didn't you tell me? And his second remark was, why didn't anyone tell me? I thought you all cared. So her intention to be empathic and not hurt Bob's feelings turned into this major hurting of feelings in the long term when she had to fire Bob. So at Radical Candor, we've got 2 dimensions. First of all, whether you personally care or not. So this goes from personally caring to not giving an F. And we've got the other dimension is whether you address something directly or whether you stay silent. This then creates 4 quadrants. Within the bottom left-hand side, you got manipulative insincerity. So here you just say nothing because you don't give a damn. So imagine that we're in the canteen and your production colleague Mary comes in. And you don't really know Mary, but you see that she's got lots of toothpaste all over her face. And you don't want to get hurt, you don't want to hurt your feelings, you don't want to get involved, so you just say nothing. Moving up to the top left, rawness, empathy. So here you personally care, but you still remain silent. This is the keys of Bob. So what really motivates people here is they don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. Like remember Kim not wanting to hurt Bob's feelings, but she did in the end. And this is the problem with this quadrant, that often in the end it hurts even more. And you have 2 versions of this, so sometimes people stay entirely silent, but it can also be very indirect, that people, like with the feedback sandwich, that they first see some positives and in there is like 1 negative point and people don't pick up on that, the feedback receiver doesn't pick up on that, or it can be that people talk about many things, the weather, what they did on the weekend, everything that's in there, and then very indirectly point at something. And often the feedback receiver just didn't get what the discussion was about. So it doesn't land because you're worried about hurting and upsetting their feelings if you say it too directly. Moving towards the other end, obnoxious aggression. So here you do say things directly, but without giving a shit. You don't care personally. I've heard the worst examples of this in workshops. One of the most illustrative examples, one of the rather angry bosses that whenever something went wrong would storm out of his office and shout, "Catherine, you idiot," in front of the entire team. That is obnoxious aggression. Then we've got radical candor on the top right. So here you address things directly, but you also personally care. You build relationships based on that. And you might say something to Marika like you go up to her and say, "Hey Marika, it seems like you've got some toothpaste on your face." And you just whisper that to her. Then you do care and you give feedback directly so people can change something. And well, most of the time people think, I can only do that when I've got a really good relationship. But it turns out that whenever you give this kind of feedback, that also builds trust and builds relationships because they say, this person clearly has my best interest at heart. Some clarifying pointers. Radically candid feedback is usually given immediately after the situation occurred, and it only takes a couple of minutes to give it. So even if you're a very busy manager, you're able to give this kind of feedback. So it is not a performance review or an annual employee conversation. So radically candid feedback concerns both positive feedback in case you want to praise someone and you give them a specific sincere compliment, and criticism. In case it is praise, you can do that one-on-one, but also praise in public to give it this extra zing and motivational effects. In case it is criticism, do this one-on-one, preferably in person or via video call. If that's not possible, then have a telephone call so at least it's a conversation. If those options are all out, then you can go for chat message or email message, but the disadvantage of these are, first of all, you don't see how the other person responds, and second of all, in case something in the description or some of your initial assumptions are incorrect, then the person hasn't got an opportunity to immediately say, hey, that was different from what you've just said, which is why a feedback conversation is always preferred to the other more asynchronous methods. The experiment. Most people tend to have one or two preferred feedback giving styles that they use, particularly if they're stressed and on autopilot. So what is your natural feedback giving style? In case you tend to stay silent, can you speak up? In case you're obnoxiously aggressive, can you tone the message down a little bit? And in case you're ruinously empathic, can you be a little bit more direct? Good luck being radically candid.